Howdy folks, hope you all had a great weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, sponsored once again by Nordpass, except this time around they're offering a significantly better deal than they were in the first half of the month. Now you can get 70% off a 2-year Nordpass premium plan with the standard extra 1 month for free, completely risk-free with Nordpass's 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get this deal and keep those passwords safe and organised.
Now, Juicy here, she isn't a young cat anymore. She's getting on and she's starting to suffer from arthritis. And so one of the features that I like most about Nordpass is that it syncs across all of your devices. So when I'm lying in bed at night browsing Instagram on my phone and an advert pops up for cat-sized step ladders so that she doesn't have to suffer any undue pain when she's climbing up and down from all of her favourite perching spots, I don't have to get out of bed and go to my PC or try to remember to do it when I'm next to my PC in the morning, because Nordpass syncs across all of my devices. So I can just go ahead and order stuff to make her life better on the phone without having to get out of bed. Isn't that right, Juicy? Yes, that's right. Juicy, please don't eat the camera. Never work with children or animals.
So, once again, nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get 70% off a 2-year premium plan with 1 month for free. And if you try it and you don't like it, it's no problem because it's all covered by Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And now, on with the show. So, as you can probably tell from the video that went up on Saturday, I've been kicking the arse out of Total War Warhammer 3 over the weekend. It's not perfect. It's crashed to desktop twice over the course of the weekend, but I put 28 hours in. And it does save at the end of every turn, so that's not exactly a mission critical bug. There are probably other bugs in there that I just haven't noticed because I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking out for. But I have been having fun. Although, as is usually the case whenever I get my hands on a new Warhammer title, I mean, I say I put 28 hours in, probably 24 of those hours were completely wasted because I was testing out factions that I ended up just really not liking the way they played. Now, if you're like me and you tend to play your Total War games more as a sort of grand strategy title, spending more time on the minimap and hardly any time on the battlefield and just auto-resolving the battles, you do not want to play Slaanesh. Because while I haven't seen it in action, because I'm auto-resolving the battles, what I think is happening is the AI is basically just charging armies into each other and then resolving everything on the roll of a dice. And Slaanesh will not win a battle like that, because the troops are, well, they have no missile units at all. They have powerful but fragile melee units, and they're very fast and have lots and lots of extremely fast cavalry, which you should be using to whip around the flanks of your opponents and give them a good old-fashioned dose of hot surprise butt sex. And I'm pretty sure that the AI just doesn't take that into account when you want to resolve a battle, because my armies of Slaanesh just couldn't win a fight to save their lives when I was auto-resolving the conflicts. On the other hand, if you do like to manually take control of each and every battle that you fight, then yeah, you can probably do extremely well with Slaanesh. So if you want your campaign to last weeks, possibly months, as you micromanage every single battle your empire gets into, then yeah, Slaanesh will probably work. Then it was time for blood for the blood gods, skulls for the skull throne, and milk for the cornflakes, and I thought that the armies of Khorne would be relatively straightforward compared to something like Slaanesh, and at first they were. I mean, there's nothing subtle about a Khorne army. You just charge straight forward into battle with your massed, heavily armoured melee units, and take skulls for the skull throne. My issue with playing Khorne, and this isn't a bad thing, it's just, you know, different people are going to enjoy playing different factions different ways, but on the campaign map where I spend most of the time, you actually do better with Khorne, not occupying settlements, but by razing them to the ground. Taking all the skulls for the skull throne, literally, and then just kind of hoping that a Khorne chaos cult would establish itself in the ruins and turn it into an actual city that you can use. Which was weird. I mean, if you're a traditional wargamer and you like taking and holding ground, Khorne is going to be very counterintuitive. Plus, there's the fact that your armies have to keep fighting. I mean, you don't have to, but you're going to regret it if you don't. They suffer all kinds of negative penalties if they're not constantly taking skulls for the Skull Throne, which I suppose is exactly the way a Chaos Army of Khorne should work. But if you're a traditional wargamer, if you've gotten used to playing things like Hearts of Iron and Stellaris and things like that, you're going to have a real hard time getting your head around the way Khorne is supposed to be played. I'm sure there are going to be all kinds of people who absolutely love the unconventional way that the faction plays, but it's definitely not going to be for everybody, which is a shame, because Khorne's units are absolutely magnificent. I'm extremely sorry to say that I had some issues with playing Papa Nurgle as well, which is a massive shame because of all of the new factions. Well, in your opinion may vary, but honestly I think Nurgle's armies are the most fun to watch in battle. But on the campaign map, well, Papa Nurgle's armies are tougher and more traditional in battle than the armies of Slaanesh. And they have a more traditional expand, conquer, and continue expanding playstyle than the armies of Khorne. But they never seem to get anything done quickly, which I suppose is appropriate for the grandfather of Rot. And one of the main mechanics that you'll have to get your head around while you're playing as Papa Nurgle is the plague mechanic. You're going to be spending a fair amount of time researching, concocting, and trying to spread new plagues, whether that's by establishing chaos cults in the cities of your enemies, or just infecting your own armies for buffs, and then transferring those plagues to the enemies that you come into contact with, where they become very quickly not buffs. It is an interesting mechanic, but there was just something about playing Nurgle that didn't quite gel with me. Maybe I don't know, I couldn't get my head around it. Perhaps I was approaching it with the wrong mindset. I mean, I want to make it work, so I'll probably give Nurgle another go. Tzeentch was the only dedicated Chaos army that I didn't try out, because I was starting to get sick and tired of Chaos, and I just wanted something that played a little bit more traditionally. So I thought I'd give the army of Cathay a shot. So this is the Chinese faction. And at first, they did seem like a traditional Total War II Empire type faction. And at first, the armies of Cathay did seem to be a lot more traditional in that respect. They have a nicely balanced mix of heavy infantry, light infantry, heavy missile troops, light missile troops, artillery, some pretty impressive giant monsters like the terracotta giant over there. But then as I started to play the army of Cathay's campaign, I started to run into, well, I'm not going to call them problems, because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who are going to enjoy these differences. But every unit and building in Cathay is either yin or yang. And you have to keep yin and yang in harmony. And if you do, you get substantial buffs. And if you don't, you get substantial debuffs. And this can lead to some ridiculous problems. For example, if your control of a particular province is slipping and it's about to descend into open rebellion, you need to invest in buildings that are going to increase your control over the province. But let's say, for example, those buildings are on the yang side of the yin-yang divide, and the province is already heavily into the yang side of the yin-yang divide. Then building those structures that are going to solve your control problem are probably actually going to give you even bigger problems, because the province is not in harmony. So you can't really just build what you want, where you need it, when you need it. You have to take the whole yin-yang harmony thing into account. And then when it comes to the finances of the Cathay Empire, they tend to rely heavily on trade caravans with other nations. And trade caravans can be attacked. So, again, I'm not saying any of these are bad things, but the army of Cathay, while it looked fairly traditional on paper, turned out to be not quite as traditional a faction to control as I may have first imagined, and I found myself just wishing I could take control of an army or empire that just conquered and occupied settlements and raised armies and put tax buildings down, and that was it. So I thought I'd give Kislev a go. Kislev is Russia, and it's traditional at this point for everybody in the comments to say, but hang on, what about all the Polish winged hussars and the Ukrainian Cossacks? And well, yeah, okay, Kislev is not Russia. Kislev is a sort of amalgamation of various different Slavic cultures. And of the 7 or 8 new factions in Total War 3, yeah, Kislev is the most traditional. There are some differences though. Kislev is a nation divided. You've got the aristocracy in the form of the Ice Witches on one side, and the Orthodox Church on the other. And both sides are vying for a resource known as devotion, and the side that ends up winning the race to get the most devotion ends up claiming control of all of the Kislev factions. So that's nice. And at first when I started playing Kislev, it was playing exactly like a traditional zero imagination style army faction, where you literally just raise armies, stick a lord or a hero in charge, and stomp around the map conquering settlements for the first few hours. And then I discovered the big problem when it comes to playing Kislev. Russia is dirt poor, which was fine when I only controlled 1 or 2 provinces and could afford to raise 2 armies. But as soon as I started to expand beyond that, I just ran out of money. I would end up with this massive sprawling empire that I couldn't afford to hold on to, because if I'd raised more than 2 armies, I went bankrupt. And while I was playing, about 10 hours into the Kislev campaign, I had the spectacular misfortune of having just managed to balance my ledger books and finally get my empire into the black, not hemorrhaging money every turn, when I won the race to get 600 devotion and assume control of the rival Kislev faction. The problem is that the rival Kislev faction was even more financially destitute than I was, and so when I took over their empire, I also inherited all of their debts. So at the point in the game where you're like, yes, I've got it, you're suddenly, no! Now thousands of gold in debt every turn. Bankrupt again. So, yeah. Oh, and I've just remembered the other thing about Nurgle that made it very difficult to play. Nurgle's buildings, you don't, build them at level 1, and then when you get some cash and there's a bit of surplus, you upgrade them to level 2, and so on and so on. The way everybody else constructs their buildings. No, you plonk your level 1 buildings down in Nurgle's settlements, and then they, over time, grow to level 2, 3, 4, or in the cases of particularly important settlements, 5, 6 or 7, and then they cycle all the way back down again, which is good because it means you don't really have to pay for any upgrades. They basically grow and then decline naturally over time. But it's bad because when you need some nasty, big, strong, powerful units, and the units, or rather buildings that construct those units or breed those units, are at the bottom end of the cycle, and all they can produce is Nurglings, well, you're shit out of luck. So I think it's fairly safe to say that if you're a boring old traditionalist wargaming player like me, who just likes to expand slowly and carefully and turtle up, you should probably stick to playing Total War Warhammer 2, at least for the foreseeable future. Next up, I thought I should revisit something that I mentioned in last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles that seemed to attract an awful lot of confusion and, some well-intentioned but outright wrong comments from a whole bunch of people. And that's the subject of the TV licence, the television licence that we have to have here in Britain. And by the way, if you can hear weird noises in the background, the country is still in the grips of Storm Eunice, with winds gusting up to 122 miles per hour and causing millions of pounds of property damage. Unfortunately, this is something that we just have to live with. So yes, a TV licence. Most people were baffled at the idea that you would have to have a licence for owning a television. That's not strictly true. But we'll go on to that in slightly more detail in a moment. The reason we have a TV licence at all in this country is because of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. When it was conceived, the BBC was intended to be a completely independent broadcaster with no government control over what it said or how it said it. But how can that be if the government funds it? Well, that's because the government doesn't fund it. And well, it technically does, but also it technically doesn't. See, this is where the television licence fee came in. The British Broadcasting Corporation is entirely paid for by the television licensing fee, which means when you're watching something broadcast by the BBC, so if you're watching a movie or a TV show on the BBC, there's no advert break every 15 minutes. A 1.5 hour long movie on the BBC is 1.5 hours long with no breaks, whereas the same movie would be 2.5 hours if you were watching it on an American station because they'd have to cram all of those ad breaks in order to be able to afford to broadcast the movie in the first place. This means that the BBC is not in the pocket of the advertisers. Unlike just about every TV channel in the world, if the BBC News says something that is likely to piss off a big corporation, it's just tough titty for the big corporation, isn't it? Because the BBC doesn't care if the big corporation pulls its adverts, because the BBC isn't running adverts anyway. Similarly, because the BBC does not rely on government funding and gets all of its money from the TV licence fee, it doesn't have to worry about upsetting government ministers either, and can say what it likes about them too. Now, I am aware that this is the part in the video where everybody puts their tinfoil hats on and says, "Oh, Jingles, if you think that the BBC is politically independent, then you are hopelessly naive." And yeah, okay, fair enough. I realise it's not quite as simple as that. But, for the most part, the BBC is easily the most politically independent television broadcaster in the world because of the way that it's funded. And then we get on to the subject of who does and does not have to pay for a TV license, and this is where a lot of people in the last episode went to check out the website of the TV Licensing Authority, and with the best of intentions they came back in the comments section of last week's Mingles and said, "Jingles, I've checked the relevant website and you could be in trouble here. You do actually need a TV license." No I don't, and I'll explain why. You see, the TV Licensing Authority's website has a vested interest in making it sound as if you do actually require a television license, because they're the ones that collect the licensing fee. So it's in their interest to have as many people as possible paying it. And they word the regulations, how can I put this, in a way that's easy to misinterpret and think that you do actually need to pay for a TV license. And what I mean by that is that on their website it says you require a television license in this country if you watch any of the BBC TV broadcast channels. Obviously, yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you use the BBC iPlayer app, okay, yep, that makes perfect sense. And if you use any on-demand streaming services like Amazon Prime, and I do have Amazon Prime to watch live broadcasts. So people said, "Jingles, you watch Amazon Prime. You need a TV license." No, I don't. The key word here is live broadcasts. The BBC's various different TV broadcasts are broadcast live, and if you watch them live, you need a license. I don't watch them live. I don't even have the facility to watch them live. I don't have a connection to a TV aerial. I also don't have the BBC iPlayer app installed, and I don't watch live broadcasts on Amazon Prime. Occasionally, Amazon will do live broadcasts of music or sporting events, which you have to pay extra for, and I don't watch them because I'm not interested. I also have the British Channel 4 app, which I think is called All 4, and I just use it to watch old Channel 4 television programmes. I don't use it to watch live Channel 4 TV. And that's the key word, live. If you don't have the BBC iPlayer app, and you don't watch any live TV broadcasts, you don't need a TV licence. No matter how much the British TV Licensing Authority's website tries to make it sound like you do. If you care enough, go back and reread the terms on the TV Licensing Authority's website and pay particular attention to where it says live. If you don't have the iPlayer app and you're not watching live television broadcasts, you do not need a television licence in Britain. So thank you to everybody who, with the best of intentions, came to the comment section of last week's episode of Mingles with Jingles and said, "Jingles, you have Amazon, you have Netflix, you could be in trouble. Looks like you need a licence." Thank you for your concern, but I really, really don't. And I probably never will, because I just don't have time for live television. And I think that's probably true, increasingly so, of most people these days. I mean, it's just far more convenient to watch stuff on demand. And plus, if I want to watch episodes of the IT Crowd, nobody's broadcasting them live anyway. You have to watch them on demand. So it's great. And plus, if I don't have a TV licence, I can continue to amuse myself on the regular occasions when the TV licensing agency sends people around and knock on my door and demand to know why I don't have a licence, because I derive endless pleasure from telling them to go forth and multiply, and if I had a licence they'd stop coming around. And where's the fun in that? Well, anyway, we've still got time before the end of this video to answer a few quick questions from the Salt Mines Discord server. Madnam26 and a whole bunch of other people wanted to know, if we're going to see any Horizon Forbidden West, the sequel to Horizon Forbidden Dawn. Yeah, definitely. As soon as it's available on PC, I will be playing it. The first game was absolutely fantastic, with one of the most compelling video game storylines I have ever had the privilege of taking part in. I'm very much looking forward to the sequel. Next up, question from some mutt up north. Greetings, Rear Admiral Overlord, sir. I know you're probably insanely busy, what with planning to move home, working on YouTube and entertaining Her Royal Highness Akazuki. Man, you don't know the half of it. But do you ever find time to read fiction books? Thank you for your recommendations for non-fiction, but are there any series or novels you've read that you liked and or recommend? Actually, yeah. If you want to read something that's just going to entertain you and probably isn't going to stretch your brain cells too much, I can definitely recommend the Jack Reacher books by Lee Child. On the other hand, if you do want to read something that is going to make you stop and think, and you like your science fiction, anything that Alastair Reynolds has written is going to be fantastic. And I'd say the same thing about anything written by Ian M. Banks. Unfortunately, Ian M. Banks is now dead, has been for a few years, and so he's not writing anything new. And Alastair Reynolds only pushes a book out about once every 2 years. So in the meantime, while I'm waiting for the next Alastair Reynolds book, I've started reading Adrian Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky as in the Russian composer, although, not the same person, just the same surname. Tchaikovsky has the same gift as Reynolds for using science fiction to write really deep, thought-provoking stuff. The difference is he's a lot more prolific. He just writes more and faster. So when I'm waiting for Reynolds to push his next book out, I know I can always find something by Tchaikovsky that I haven't read. And I think that about covers it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. If you're still watching, thanks for watching to the end. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.